Cuz says, hey, cuz, how to know if when our prayers are not being answered, if it's God's delayed timing, ourselves doing or not doing something, or the enemy? Great question. Well, the beautiful thing about prayer is that we get confirmation. What I mean by confirmation, I talked about that when I talked about from Philippians. When we pray, God's confirmation number is his peace. His peace says, I have the pieces. You're good. I tell people not to focus on when the prayer is answered, because if you focus on when that prayer is answered, you will be focusing on a particular way you want that prayer to be answered. If you focus so much about how a prayer is going to be answered, you're going to have a false expectation of answered prayer. You have a false expectation on the time frame of the answered prayer. You will have a false expectation on how that prayer is going to be answered. And then you won't even become the answered prayer for the answered prayer. I tell people all the time, don't worry about whether or not a prayer request is going to be answered. Make sure that you are answered prayer. Every prayer you pray, ask yourself, am I an answered prayer for that prayer? If not, become the answered prayer. People are asking God to answer their prayer about a spouse, but they're not an answered prayer for what that spouse is praying for. People want God to answer these different prayer requests, but if that personal thing was to have a prayer request about you, you are not an answer for it. So when you give your prayer to God, trust that however he does it, whenever he does it, he'll do it. And focus on you becoming the person that matches the prayer request. So go from praying to preparing. A lot of us need to open more space in our prayer time. Most of our prayers are requesting. We're requesting, or we just venting. Some of us, our prayers have to open up into intercession, open up into covering our families and operate in dominance and counseling plots and schemes and destroying the devil's plans. But and then take the stuff that we've been praying for and start preparing for it. So I think when you have that perspective, you will say, God, whatever you do with it, I trust you with it. Now, he says, how to know if when our prayers are not being answered, it is God's delayed. You'll know everything when that prayer is answered. You'll know everything when that prayer is answered differently than what you expected. You will know when that prayer is never answered. You know how many times I prayed for stuff to be answered and it never was answered? That's the most difficult thing for us as believers. That's why we have to check our motives when praying. Sometimes we care more about the prayer request than the person that we're praying to. So no matter what, everything is delayed for your development. So all you got to do is this. Remember, these are the 3 or 4 things you must do to set yourself up in a better position for your prayer to be answered the way God desired to be answered, and it will give you the supreme amount of joy. Number 1, accept the delay. Expect the delay. Measure the delay based upon your development. So while your prayer is being answered, however it's being answered, maximize the delay. Use the delay for your development. So start developing. That's all you need to do. Number 2, what are you doing right now that could push that prayer request back or not answer that prayer? Then make those changes. Number 3, if it's the enemy, you got to ask yourself, where in my life do I have open doors for the enemy that can come in, steal, kill, and destroy the opportunity for that prayer request? That's Michael. That is a possibility. There is a possibility that all 3 of those things will happen. And there is a possibility that what you pray for is part of God's will for your life, but because you was out of God's will, that thing was never revealed into your life. So to set yourself up to have a high probability of your prayers being answered, number 1, you got to develop within the delay. Number 2, you got to assess what could you be doing right now sinfully, or what weights or sin in your life to keep you from that prayer being answered, because God answers prayers based upon his providential timing and based upon your preparation. If those 2 are not connected and working together, that prayer request could be sabotaged because of that lack of preparation or practicing of sin. Or you allow the enemy to still kill and destroy, and that prayer opportunity was destroyed because of whatever plot or scheme you allow him to work in your life. So now you got to stop being ignorant of Satan's devices and ask yourself. I always do this to myself. I put myself in my demon shoes. Oh, yeah. You heard that correctly. I think like a demon. If I was a demon set against me, what would I throw against me? When you put yourself in your opponent's shoes, you are less likely being ignorant of his devices. You know you better than anyone else. You know exactly where your open doors are, where your vulnerabilities are, how the enemy will attack you. What you do is, if I was a devil, how would I keep me from the next level? Then, my friend, you will set yourself up in a position to have your prayers answered.